Okay, in the last piece, I discussed the meaning of the word income and its how we define that word and its likely effect on the Lorenz curve over time, just in the way that we might use adjusted gross income as the thing we're actually measuring. Uh, what I was meaning to get to, and I don't think I said it very well, was we also, if we are actually using adjusted gross income, and this thing bellies as it sort of should because of the definition of terms and our shift from um, defined benefit plans to defined contribution plans, which, by the way, might have meaningful implications for wealth and society in that shift, but that's its own subject, right? But if we look at that and really focus on the term, then this probably just shouldn't be too surprising. And so I would suggest that authors who use that measure but imply that it means something about an erosion of the middle class might be sort of exaggerating, because I'm in that category where I'm maxing out my contributions to an IRA and I'm maxing out my contributions through CCBC of the employer match contributions. So I am in my prime earning years, and I am lowering my adjusted gross income absolutely as much as I possibly am allowed or I can financially. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for me as a household in the long term, because what I'm doing is providing for my future. And I'm also setting money aside, not consuming, which is money that our economy can use for investment. So I think sometimes what's implied is a little bit more than what is true just on the definition of terms of what is adjusted gross income. Now, a second bias of this, or thing to watch for or think about with this model and how it's often used, is along the lines of age. I mentioned I'm in my prime earning years. In my notes, I've put a link of what those prime earning years are by gender. And that really matters, because some places, some things I've seen say the entire change that you see here could be attributed to the aging of the baby boomers. Because what happens in societies, and this again could be its own problem. It could be something wrong with this, related to poverty or income, but that's again, that's its own discussion. There is something with age in our society where we tend to have our peak earning years in our 40s and our 50s. When we're young, we don't earn that much. I mean, when you're in college, your annual earnings, adjusted gross income or income, holding constant what I said before, is going to be low because you're just getting started in life. Then you get work experience and you begin moving up as you age until in your 40s and 50s, that's when we tend to peak, and maybe there's a problem with that. In my case, I actually hope to peak in my 40s and 50s and be able to cut back as I get older, particularly if the mortgage is already paid. But I don't know. Maybe that's not what's going on there. Maybe it's ageism. I don't know. That's its own discussion. But for whatever the cause, it tends to be that we peak in our earnings around, let's say, age 50. The specifics are in my notes. We had this baby boom starting in the 1950s. There was a high birth rate, right? So let's say kids born in 1960 were only 20 years old when they were in 1980. Okay. Then in 2005, they were 45 years old. They had achieved their peak earning age. Well, that's a large percentage of the population earning a higher income than a small percentage of the populations who were the baby busters who came after them, who were then in their 20s and 30s and in the lower earnings spectrum of their lives. So just the movement of the baby boomers through the labor force, coupled with the fact that we hit a peak earnings in our roughly at age 50, would mean that we should expect a bellying of this distribution just by those two facts put together. and it is not necessarily telling of anything greater societal going on that is implied by this discussion when you hear of the erosion of the middle class. The erosion of the middle class, all else held constant, should be expected using this measure of it just because of age and the peak earnings in the life cycle that we face.